welcome to another episode of Tell Muses, a podcast by storytellers, with storytellers, for storytellers, and anyone interested in the art of the oral word. Today we have with us, all the way from the UK, Sarah Lloyd Winder, a wonderful lady I'm sure you're dying to learn more about. Hello, Sarah, and welcome.
Hello.
Hello and good morning.
You're connecting from Somerset today, you said.
Yes, this is my father's house.
For the
So my
people
father is a bit grumpy this morning. He said he wouldn't get up early.
I totally relate to you, Dad. So, for the people who can only hear and not see, Sarah has got two wonderful pieces of art, geometrical art behind her that come from her artistic son. It seems like art is running in the family, Sarah.
Yeah, and the lamp is made by Matthew, my husband.
Ooh, lovely. So, I'd like to start this interview by asking you what we always ask our muses, which is a very wide open question, so you can take it any way you like. Could you please tell for our listeners who Sarah Lloyd Winder is?
Yes. Well, I'm somebody who grew up from the age of 10 in Somerset. I went to a school down the road from where you can see Glastonbury Tor, which is a hill of mystery and Arthurian legend and fairies under the hill. I spend a lot of time looking out the window at it rather than working. And at that stage, really, I was a dancer. I did classical ballet and contemporary dance and went to do a performing arts degree. I had a dance company. And then my dance company became more, they would pay us to do children's theatre work as a dance company. And so we did that because they wouldn't pay us to do dance work. So we started adding words, goodness me, because dancers don't talk. Eventually I became solo. I'd had 3 children by then, so it all became a bit complicated. And I did less performance. At some point I went and did a master's in media, culture and communication. And I was doing digital storytelling, which is like pre-games gaming in the sense that everything's interactive. You know, it started with words. Computer games started with words, didn't they? Go to the door, go through the door. Which way are you going to choose? And so we worked on things like that. And I did a workshop, storyteller, whose name I can't remember, whose face I can remember. And she now lives in Sweden or Norway, I think. And I thought, why am I not performing, really? So I just sort of turned and at the same time, other things happened in my life. And I thought, am I going to keep going as a teacher in further education and higher education? Or am I going to perform again? And I went back to performing because that's my first love. Yeah. And then I did a whole load of workshops with a lady called Nell Phoenix, who's absolutely lovely. That sort of cemented the way I work, I think, how I focus my work.
Sarah, you mentioned that you're close to Glastonbury. So I know a little bit about Glastonbury and the connection to art and also the occult witches and stuff like that. Is your passion for art connected to this place where you grew up and the atmosphere that you can breathe going around Glastonbury? Do you think that it's also connected to this place where you grew up?
Yes, I think so, because I love history. I'm obsessed by history, and some of my stories are based on history tales. I didn't realize that I was just imbibing it. So I lived in a little hamlet, and the hamlet has no shops, no pubs, no nothing. And then we moved to a little village down the road, and I could see Cadbury Camp from my bedroom window. And Cadbury Camp on midsummer, there is magic. There is a magic road that opens in the hill, and the knights of King Arthur come out and they go on the magic road to Glastonbury Tor. And you just imbibe it. You don't know that it's a story and that other people don't know the story and other people aren't obsessed with magic and the land and the way the bluebells come out. You just think it's absolutely normal. So I went to study for my degree and I went to a big house on the outside of London. It's on the very edge of London and it's called Trent Park. So we were in this great mansion with little bits of college round and daffodils in the garden. And that place was magic too. And that place had connections with Sassoon, who was a First World War poet, and had connections in the Second World War because it was a place where they took prisoners and the whole place was mic'd up so they can hear them. So there were stories, and there was an orangery, which is a beautiful glass building that we use for music. And that was very romantic as well, you know. And so, oh, we got obsessed by the pre-RAF lights. I don't know. And I love history and love finding out about places. So these things you imbibe.
And Sarah, you also mentioned that you were a dancer. As a dancer myself, I always love to meet other storytellers that were dancers, are dancers, etc. I like to ask, how do you think that dancing helped you for storytelling?
I did reject all the classical ballets, but you live them, don't you? As a child, oh, I must have been about 6. And ballet would start with you going into the room and doing the corners of the room, the faces of the room, or do all your positions, or you do the dance, all the gestural things that you have in ballet. And I learned that really early. And I think that I used to do with my sisters, I used to do telling stories with your hands. The waterfall came down, the fish swam in the waterfall, and I'd do talking stories. And it was something I did as workshops with children in schools when we were a dance company primarily, to get them thinking of the way that they use dance in their lives, because we all use gesture and gesture becomes bigger and then becomes a movement that expresses something. And I think you're always telling a story, even if you're telling a sculptural story. I was very into dance where it was about the bodies moving. And I did a piece called Torsion, and it was based on a piece of sculpture by Garbo. It felt like there were 2 hands meeting and twisting. And so there were 2 people, and they let go and caught, and let go and caught. And sometimes they didn't catch. That was brilliant. But even that is a story, isn't it? You're creating stories. And I think that's what I did. And gradually I became more narrative in the performance work I was doing for children. I was just adding more story with my sort of romantic folklore impetus. But I think I also grew up with classical stories, Greek stories, English history stories. It just seemed normal. And I know that it's me and my family because Hugo, who's my middle son, does a lot of work with folklore and the Glastonbury image of Arthur and the knights under the hill.
You know what? I remember somebody saying that there are different kinds of storytelling, of course, but when we talk about performative storytelling, I remember someone saying that when you enter a room or tent or whatever, you need to know by first glance who the storyteller is. Now that I know about your theatrical/dancing past, I can understand how all the costumes and the hats and the props you use, their origin, where they come from. And of course, for people who don't know Sarah, Sarah is a very slender, very upright lady. She always has the right body posture and everything. You can tell there's some dance behind her. So there are things that stick with you, no matter whether you're conscious of them or not, I guess. But what about the genres you pick, Sarah? I've heard you tell different kinds of stories.
I think that's because you have different audiences. So I have a whole load of work that goes into schools. So you work in one format for that. And then I think you do more interactive work with adults. And then you do stories that you don't want them to respond to. So I think that's how I think about the work I do. I did a show on Monday. Yes, this week's been very hectic. I was in a wooden panelled room in an old hotel. You can imagine 17th century. This is a big old hotel. I told Japanese tales and Icelandic tales, and I always think they're very sharp and quite bitter. Things happen, death happens, and that's it. Or the witch does this and she gets into trouble. And I think I like those, but then a different audience and you have to create a different atmosphere. And I think that's why I tell in different ways in different audience situations. And then when you tell and you're in a group of 3 or 4 people, you have to fit in with what the atmosphere of the evening is. Storytelling is quite interesting in that way, isn't it? I do online stuff and I create work online that's then put on QR codes and you can access. And that's totally different from working a room where you have to look in the eyes of people, you have to get them to respond, you want them to laugh, you want them to go, ooh.
So you've told many different age groups. Do you have a favorite group?
I think it's the group I'm in front of at the time.
Right, of course. Yeah, yeah.
At one point, I worked very much with tiny children because there was a whole load of funding in the UK for something called Sure Start. Every Thursday, I would be sent, felt like a package, to a different nursery setting, or preschool setting. And that was quite challenging. And you had to create this whole system of working with them. And you get really involved and you know exactly how you do it. But after a while, you go, oh, I just want to talk to an adult, please. Please, can I have a response from an adult? You know, and now I think, oh, could I actually do that? Do I remember how you have to act? And that's quite amusing, really. Very different. But then, you know, I did towards the end of lockdown, somebody asked me to go and work with isolated groups. So these are people who'd ended up during COVID lockdowns, very much isolated in their homes. Hertfordshire, which is where I live, had in their libraries set up these groups. And I went to various groups, and a lot of them were quite mature. I was quite worried because I don't work with elder people. I've got my father, but that's it. And I really, really enjoyed it. They were as naughty as the children. I remember going into a library one day and thinking, wow, what's that noise? Oh, it's half term. All the children are here. I went around the corner and it was 40 mature people. And they were as wicked and naughty and responding as a bunch of primary school children. For goodness sake. That was lovely. But funding disappears and you can't do that anymore.
Yeah. But you're still working with schools, aren't you?
Yes, I did some schoolwork this term, but I took a lot of November off to try and focus on some little festival I might be working.
We will get back to that later on. For the moment, do you think it would be all right if we asked for a little story from you?
Ooh, okay, yeah. So, what sort of story do you want? I'll do a short version of something set where I am today.
The length is up to you, so you pick.
Okay. So, we're in Wincanton, and I did a project in Wincanton, fully funded. It was lovely. And the project all started when I found this story. It was market day in Wincanton, and everybody had come, and so had the local young lord. He had spent every bit of money he had on a new horse. And it was beautiful. The back arched gently. The neck was long. The shine was exquisite. And the legs, oh, they walked so elegantly. You see, this is the time when to have the most beautiful horse was the equivalent to today having the most beautiful car, spending the millions on a Ferrari and Maserati. And this is what this young man had, a beautiful horse. But what's the good of having a beautiful horse if you don't show it off? So into the town of Wincanton he came. On market day, everyone was there. This was a coaching in town. And there were many, many public houses and inns. So he would go from one to the other, talking about his beautiful horse, how amazing it was, until in the marketplace, just outside the house here, he met his friend. And his friend wasn't ready to take it all at face value. Oh, no. Are you sure it's as amazing as you say it is, this horse? I mean, you're saying it goes so fast. Shall we try and prove this? And the young man, oh, yes, he said. It's just as fast as I say it is. Look, I reckon I can get home over the hill to Staunton in 12 minutes. And his friend, well, deal, he said, and they shook hands. Now, it being market day, everybody was watching, everybody was looking, and soon it went round the town. The young my lord, he's going to go home in 12 minutes. And there were some who said he couldn't, and some who said he could. And soon there was a lot of gambling. And everybody wanted to get sight of the race. So the market square was suddenly full of horses, carts, coaches, everybody wanting to watch this race. The mayor was made to start. He would raise his handkerchief and drop it. The young man went and got his horse. A quick brush, a stroke, and on the horse he was. And horse and rider did look exquisite. I mean, it was also the time when a young man spent more on his costume than a young woman. Those skin-tight breeches. The kid, oh, fine boots. The cutaway coat and the fold of your cravat was so important, and young man and horse were exquisite. Silence went round the market square. Everybody paused, held their breath. The mayor lifted the handkerchief and dropped it, and the race was off, up the high street and out of the town. Everybody following, carts, carriages, whatever they could get on, shouting and screaming. They raced off out of the town, through Bayford, up, out to another pub called Hunter's Lodge. And then he veered off left over the fields. And now he started jumping fences and walls, and everybody could see, and it was incredible. He looked beautiful. That horse raced so fast, it looked like those pictures that you see now of Georgian riders. But then a shout went up. Black dog! Black dog! Now you see, this young man, his family owned Storehead, a beautiful Palladian garden, landscaped with temples, a grotto, a lake. But it was a place of loss as well. There had always been bad losses in the family. And before a loss was always the black dog. And so when the shout went up, everybody knew what it meant. And there was a sharp intake of breath, and then you could see it. Horse and rider galloping over the field, and this large black shape alongside it, seemingly jumping at the same time. And then the last big launch over a fence. and the black dog rising at the same time, and then horse and rider and dog tumbling and rolling and rolling. There was a pause in the entourage, the mad racing carts and horses. But soon they caught up. What they saw was a mess. Underneath it all was the young my lord, crushed by his horse. The horse barely alive, broken. Of the black dog, there was nothing. Because, of course, there never was. It was there as the potent of death.
Sad.
Yeah, but it was really funny because when I was living in Wincanton and doing a lot of ballet, I performed in Midsummer Night's Dream, and we did it in the open air at Storehead. And my ballet teacher said, you know, there's always been bad luck in the family. And I'd remembered that, and I never thought of it until years later when I heard the story.
Perfect.
So I was thinking, Sarah, after hearing your story, that usually, as per superstition in Europe, we have connected black cats to bad luck. But there's a whole thing about black dogs in England, isn't there?
Yes, there's the East Anglian ones where they're like, oh, the devil, basically the devil dog. It was interesting because somebody told the tinderbox story at the weekend where there are three dogs, eyes as big as saucers, eyes as big as dinner plates, eyes as big as, I can't remember, and they're big dogs, and that's a German story as well. But no, we have a lot of black dog symbolism here. And the black dog is like the symbol of death or the symbol of the devil, the wild dog. I suppose because we don't actually have a lot of wolves. And in other stories, it might be the wolf. Yeah, it's quite interesting.
A black dog signifying death, upcoming death, would be like the equivalent of an Irish banshee, I guess.
There are times when it can be a white dove as well. There are stories where the white dove arrives on the window, and that's the symbol. It's bad luck, isn't it? You know, the black dog is the bad luck of the
Yeah, but
story.
it's like, it's not causing it, it's not malevolent, it's
No,
just there.
no. Yeah, it's the sign. Yes. Actually, I don't know much about the family. My mother knew a lot more about that family. So I don't know how many of them died. I assume that they would have died in the First World War, and that's why the house eventually went to the National Trust. Because I don't think there's any member of the family left now. But the house is still there, and you can go and visit the gardens, and you can see it in one of the Jane Austens that's big, and something else there recently.
Yeah, it's a brilliant place. I've been to the house in the gardens. I think it was something like 15 years ago now. I remember it was a brilliant place and so idyllic and
Yeah.
peaceful. And when you mentioned it in connection to bad luck, I just couldn't fathom how that could be connected to bad luck. Like just this idyllic place where you walk, there is the water, the garden, but at the same time, you know, when there's beauty, it can also be connected to death and bad luck.
I'm spending a lot of money. You know,
Yeah.
somebody spent an awful lot of money to create almost like a film set before we had film sets. And that's what it is. It's like a film set. There's a bridge with the grass. And when we did the show, you would run across the bridge because the stage area was on the other side. I think I've done 2 or 3 shows there. And you get bitten to death, you know, by the mosquitoes. And it goes from quite pleasant evening to good God, it's freezing and we're in dresses with nothing between us and the world.
Covered in bloodsuckers. Yeah, I get it.
Yes. But it's also quite a weird, it's an odd place to be at night. It is quite fun because up on the hills behind it is a thing called Alfred's Tower. And that's a folly as well. You can see right down over Somerset on the land of King Alfred. So he's another of my history people that you learn a lot about, the first king of England.
So, Simone, you know, a lot of storytellers say they sit with their stories. Have you heard this expression
Yes.
before? Sit with the story? Sarah does not do exactly that. She walks with the stories. And she carries the stories with her. I remember you getting prepared to tell the highway woman. Was
Oh,
it?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She had the whole set, the whole costume, the whole theatrical scene ready, and she
Yeah.
was up there on a tree, sitting on the branches in the role. She was living it.
Yeah.
Living the story, not sitting with the story.
No, I think I have to walk with the story and be the story. Yeah, the highway woman, I love her.
Yeah.
Because why on earth would you call her a wicked woman when she did things that everybody else did at the same time?
Well, we have had at least this tendency as a society to put the blame on women very easily, and that covered
Yeah.
both sexes, not just men, in very patriarchal times. But I think all of us in this company right now do the same thing. We very often use female characters. They do things in our stories and they overcome difficulties and the like, things you have to do in a story. But sometimes those have been portrayed as the villains.
Yes.
Exactly because of the different society rules at the time that the story was set. And now we can change that. Isn't that lovely?
It's very straightforward that we're not supposed to do that. So, you know, anybody who does is wicked, bad, wrong. They've crossed a line. But I find it difficult to tell stories that aren't about women. I do a couple, and especially when I go into schools, I try and remember that there's going to be boys. You know, having two of my own. So you do want to tell stories of everybody, but it's just more normal. You know what a woman is going to feel like. Yeah, I've got a great news story coming up. I discovered the other day. So the story goes that the father wanted a piece of land and had a dispute with somebody else. But actually, when it came to a challenge and he would have to fight a duel, and this was in the time of armor and galloping and jousting and all that, he actually took to bed and said he was ill. And his daughter is so upset that he could be such a coward that she goes and puts on his ridiculous armor, gets winched onto his horse, because I mean, literally he couldn't get on any other way, and sets off and fights this young milord. And she falls off the horse and he's about to come over and cudgel her to death when it's revealed she's a woman, and he's most upset. And a romance ensues and they get married. But that upsets the father even more because now he's lost the land and he's lost the daughter, and he starts getting really evil. And every time somebody argues with him, he hits them, or to the extent that one day he hits a man with a scythe, and the man with the scythe turns round and chops his head off. Yes, it's great. But now he's a ghost.
Ooh.
And if you go to the place in Northamptonshire, you will find the ghost of Stumbling Dudley, and he carries his head under his arm. Having read the history, somebody said they've stuffed two stories together. Over time, these stories that were actually separate have come together, but I still think it's great fun, that one.
Indeed.
I've only learned about that this week, so it's definitely something to work on.
Oh, lovely.
I like the idea that you had to winch somebody onto the back of their horse once they had all that armor on. If you've ever seen that much armor, it's impossible to move.
And they were not meant to hold breasts.
No, she probably had to bind herself in.
Yeah.
Do you know Terry Pratchett?
Of course, we love Terry Pratchett.
Okay. Terry Pratchett has links with Wincanton.
Ah.
Because he had a friend who opened a shop here called the Cunning Artificer. So I met Terry Pratchett several times. I sat and talked to him.
Lucky you.
We're twinned with Unk Morpork, you see.
Whoa.
In one of the stories, there's a fanatical Lloyd Winder, W-Y-N. That was at the time.
Watch, wasn't it? Yeah. He was the Lord, yeah.
Yes, when my father was the mayor. Colin Winder was the mayor.
Oh, okay, this is a total secret. We'll never let it out, Sarah.
No,
You people listening, do not tell anyone. You
no,
must take it to the grave.
that's it.
Lovely. Do you think we should talk a little bit about the East Anglian now?
Yes, the East Anglian Storytelling Festival takes place in Stowmarket in Suffolk, a long way away from where I'm sitting now. It's a lovely small festival. I only started going about 5 years ago. Before that, I'd been in different places, sort of every year, but now it's sort of settled in one place. And Marion Leaping has been commanding the festival for the last few years. And she said she was going to give up. And everybody was absolutely silent. So in the end, I said, all right, I will do it.
The sacrifices a girl must make.
Yes, yes. It's absolutely terrifying. And I've got to do a big grant application so that we can have the festival that we want. If we don't get the grant application, we still do a festival, but it's very, very small and people don't get paid. But it's just so lovely. It's really based in the area it exists in. So we like to use people from around the area. There's a visitor that comes every year and she doesn't actually live in the area. She lives a little bit away on an island.
Just a few miles.
Just a few miles, but she seems to be part of the festival as well.
Apparently. Okay, let me put some geographical spot in the minds of the listeners that may not be very familiar with English geography. So, Sarah currently is at a spot at the southern western part of England. The total contrast, right? Middle England to the east side. So, if you know where Cambridge is, it's very close to Cambridge, just so people can have an idea of what we're talking about.
If you look at the UK, it's got a big belly. And East Anglia is the big belly that sticks out at the side. And on the other side of the island, there's a long pointy bit. And I'm at the top of the long pointy bit today. Going down, we go from Somerset to Devon to Cornwall. East Anglia is Suffolk and Norfolk and Essex, yes.
Yeah, that big belly is pregnant with stories.
It is. And some of the most unusual stories are there. You have the stories of the green children that you don't get anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
You have the buried moon, which appears elsewhere, but you can trace the buried moon story back to somebody recording a child telling it, which is just lovely. I did tellings of the buried moon, and I did a project in schools with the buried moon last year, and the children made little puppets of the darklings, because the buried moon story is all about the moon coming down. It's a lovely story.
And what about the Food Museum? That's a lovely venue. Tell us about that.
Yes, it was the East Anglian Rural Life Museum, but I think it was suffering a lot and wasn't going anywhere. It had barns full of stuff. So in this sort of museum, it's one of those places where they collected old buildings and put them on the site. We have something called the Settling House, which is, I think it's 8-sided. This is where you would come in the market to pay for your cows, the pigs, the horses that you'd bought, the settling house. And of course, when the road went through Bury St Edmunds, they were going to get rid of it. So they took it down, took it to the museum and built it there. But that, I think, made it difficult to have a focus. So just before we joined the museum, they changed the name to the Food Museum. There were some people who didn't like the change, but the leader of the Food Museum, a young woman, is quite incredible. And they've become really focused. They did a whole big exhibition about school food last year and how school food had been introduced into schools, how important it was, how we've lost that importance, how in the UK we think we should go back to having more nutritious food for everybody. It links into political changes as well. But it's talking about where our food comes from, because East Anglia is where a lot of land is farmed for the food that we eat every day. In a very highly industrialized nation, we've lost track of that. East Anglia in the past has been a very, very rich area. It's notorious for having immense churches the size of cathedrals because it was the wool area. Wool was so important. There was the Hanseatic League, which was a trading community between, I think it was Belgium and Holland, Sweden and East Anglia. And people made a lot of money. There was smuggling going on as well, a lot of smugglers. But sometimes at points you couldn't sell your wool abroad. But the Belgium weavers wanted English wool because it was good quality. And this is what gave the area its wealth in a way. And then later the Dutch came in, and it's a land of bogs and water and marshes. And the Dutch came in and they put in their systems of taking the water off the land and putting them into ditches and culverts and rivers and all the other things, and lots of water mills and water systems.
We can see some of that around the museum, but let's focus on the festival now, Sarah. So we've had different sorts of festivals, different topics, different themes on previous festivals. And what's the one about next year?
Well, of course, because we're midsummer, so we're doing solstice and food. It sort of culminated in that. We're normally held in May. Because they're doing loads of redevelopment, we couldn't be there in May. So we're there in June. We're over the midsummer weekend. And there are a lot of folklore and tradition about midsummer. It's a really important time in food production, because that's when we start harvesting all the fruits, early cereals. So it seems really important to mix the two. I think folklore comes in because of things like that. Why do we have lots of folklore in midsummer? Because in this dirty, wet, grimy land of England, sometimes in the summer it's actually warm and sunny, and you get outside and you sit outside and you can eat outside and drink outside. And so people start seeing the fairies, the pixies, the feskies, as they're called in East Anglia. All these things suddenly appear, the magic appears, and the strange, and this is when people sit around and tell strange stories. There are two times of the year when it's really important. In the deep midwinter, when you tell ghost stories and creepy stories, and in the summer, when you tell stories of love and magic.
Yeah, because, in Yule season, people are getting ready to go through the harsh winter. And then in midsummer, other than the agricultural part, we must celebrate because we have survived said winter, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all about love and coupling and pairing, because life must go on.
Yeah, and we must dance and celebrate. There's the whole thing of jumping over the fire.
On that note, for people who have not been there yet, there is storytelling, of course, which is the major part of the festival, but there's also music, there's also poetry, and there is a big place where people can camp, and you can get a whole weekend ticket. And there are so many open mix that people can take part and share a story if they like.
That's a really important part of it, because it's not always about the people who are very skilled telling a story. It's about everybody telling a story.
Exactly.
And sharing. And bring a story and share a story is really important, because everybody has stories.
Bring stories.
Bring stories in your cart.
Do you think we could have your second story now, Lo?
Oh, yes. So what shall I?
Story.
Let's have something. Let's have the moon story then from East Anglia. The Buried Moon. The moon loved her land of East Anglia, and she wanted to go down on that land and see it. So one night she pulled her cloak over her head and stepped down onto the land. But it wasn't what she expected. The pathways were wet and slippery. Everything was wet. The bogs seemed to start on the pathway and fall away, and her feet squelched in the mud. And also she could hear laughing and chittering and noises everywhere she went. And of course, when the moon is not in the sky, there is no light on the land, especially when she was wearing her big cloak. And sometimes even the moon can't see the pathway. And as she walked along, she slipped and she fell into a bog. And although she held the grasses, she was falling in. And those little noises suddenly became little hands pushing and pulling at her and chittering and laughing. And they pressed her down into the mud, into the pools. The boogles and the bogles and the witches and the will-o'-the-wisps were holding the moon. On the other side of the marsh, of the buried land, came a man walking home, walking as fast as he could. And the moon had disappeared and he couldn't see the pathway and he was panicking and he was talking to himself and the moon could hear him. I can't see the path, I can't see the path. I don't want to fall in. I can't see the path. I can't see the path. And with one great effort, the moon shook her head and threw back the hood. And the light shone out. And the man could see the pathway and he ran as fast as he could off the bog into safety. But then the boogles and the bogles and the darklings and the will-o'-the-wisp, they pulled at the moon and they pulled her down and they pressed her down under the water. And they got a big stone and they put it on top and they laughed and they cheered and they chittered. And they celebrated, for they had buried the moon and no one would be able to see. And this was their land and they owned it totally now. Now, the people of that land, it's called the Car in Lincolnshire, they started to realise the moon had not come back. You see, in a month, the moon comes, is full, and then goes. And there's a little piece of time when it's dark. But this piece of time that was dark went on and on and on until the people began to talk. And they began to worry. And so the people went to the wise woman. And the wise woman said, go back. Talk to everybody. Find out who was the last person to see the moon. And so they went back and they asked and nobody knew. And then one day that man who had run along the pathway, he heard somebody asking and he said, yes, I saw a flash of light. I saw the pathway and I ran and came home. I've never thought of it again. So they took the story back to the wise woman. And she said, come back tomorrow and I tell you what you have to do. So when they went back, the wise woman said, you have to put a stone in your mouth. You have to take a willow wand, a branch of willow, in your right hand. And you must put your left hand on the shoulder of the person in front. And you must walk out onto the bog. And you must sing in your head the songs of the moon. And once you're there, you must look for the candlestick that is beneath the cross. And under the candlestick is the gravestone, and there you will find the moon. So the people, they did what they were told. They went and got a stone and they put it in their mouths. They went and got a willow wand and they held it tight in their right hand, and they put their left hand on the shoulder of the person in front. And in their head, they sang the songs of the moon as they walked out onto the land, onto the bogs. And they stamped as they went, stamp, 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 following each other as they walked right into the middle of the bogs. And they kept their eyes open, and somebody saw a tree dropped that formed a great cross. And underneath was a bowl like a candlestick. And as they looked down in the pond, there was a great big stone, like a gravestone. And the people, they got down into the bog and they pulled at that stone, and they pulled and they heaved and they heaved and they pulled. Now, some said it was a flash. Some said it was like a sucking noise. Others that it was a swish. But as they lifted that stone, suddenly, as they looked up, the moon was in the sky. And the people of the land, they stamped their way home, taking the stones out of their mouths as they sang the songs of the moon out loud. Thank you.
Yay!
Brilliant story.
It is. There are various different versions, and it was rather lovely that my sister's partner was working on that land last year. And he said he went and talked to somebody in a farmhouse, and they'd lived in that farmhouse, the family, since the 1700s.
Whoa.
And they're looking at how to restore that land, because it's still pools and ponds and bogland, and there's a little bit of it left. And it's important to remember the story, because remembering the story helps people remember how important it is, and you still want to be able to say, well, the land is still there.
So what happened to the marshes? The marshes are no longer there, are they?
They are there in some places. So last year in the East Anglian Storytelling Festival, people went out to some nature reserves, and some of those nature reserves still have boglands and floods happening, so that there's a great deal of water birds that come into East Anglia. But in other places, the land is very rich because they've drained the land that for millions of years had the water coming in and out and replacing the nutrients on top of the land. So it's very rich agricultural land. But now, of course, you drive across East Anglia and they're watering all the time.
There's a miniature of what Sarah is describing in that place, that food museum in Stowmarket, because you can walk around it, and there's a great big mansion that would be the Lord's house back in the day, and several smaller ones that would be for the servants, I guess, I take it, or stable boy or whatever. And then if you go further around it, you pass through a windmill, and there's a place where they keep horses, and there's a place where they keep wood, and you can see what it was used for. There are signs that explain things about people's past. And you know that story, Sarah? It was one of my favorite stories as well. I recorded it and gave it to my friends who organized the Greek-Irish festival in Athens every year. I recorded it for them like 3 years ago, and they had this QR where people could go around the different little trees and scan it and hear the stories. And I knew it was English, of course, not Irish, but still I loved the story. So I picked that one, and I never knew it came from East Anglia, you see.
Oh,
This is how
yeah.
nicely pieces of the puzzle connect.
Yes, it is lovely, isn't it? And it's a lovely lovely feeling of darkness and moon and rescue and bogs and evil, and yeah, which meant that all the children that I worked with loved making little stick puppets of the darklings. And suddenly these darklings had a life of their own. They were, I loved it. 60 children, 60 puppets. I filled the settling house with these very strange looking stick puppets. They were
Awesome.
brilliant. But I like doing that sort of thing. I like getting children to make things and move on from where I've been into another world, another creation. Because a story leads to a story. You tell a story and they recreate the story in their way. And adults do it as well. You tell a story and they'll tell you something back. I did 2 hours on Monday night and I finished. And then I asked them if they wanted to ask questions. That went on for another 10, 15 minutes. That was a silly thing to do because suddenly you're starting to talk about story and they're adding things in.
So the topic of the next festival is going to be food, you said? Harvesting? Midsummer?
Midsummer stories and food, or food and stories. Like midsummer food and stories, midsummer stories and food.
Okay, lovely. Connected both to summer and the food. Okay, good to know.
Yeah, but because I keep thinking of we have something called summer pudding, which is a really funny thing. You have a pudding bowl and you put in bread, and then you mix up summer fruits that are slightly gone. You might have strawberries or raspberries or blackberries or not cherries, normally currants. And you stick them all in a pot and you cook them and put some sugar in, perhaps even some alcohol. And you stick them in this bread and it seeps into the bread. And you press it down and you have this pudding shape, this little mountain. And it's called summer pudding. And very leftoverish, but it becomes quite splendid. And I like that idea of something that's, we've got a bit of bread and bit of fruit and we'll make something splendid out of it.
And nothing goes to waste, a very important lesson for us all to remember nowadays, because we forgot about that.
Yeah, I remember being in Morocco and they have a special dish which is using leftover bread all mixed in together the day after. And I think we forget those sort of things when in the past you couldn't. But there you go.
Oh, lovely. I'm sure it's going to be a wonderful festival next year. I'm so looking forward to it. More than normal because I'm bringing Persa along. She is my 11-year-old daughter, and it will be her first time on a plane, her first time abroad, and her first time to England. And she's going to be speaking English with real English people for the first time. Yay!
Not scary at all.
It's like, I'm taking you to all my friends and they're all nutters and
she's going to fit right in.
brilliant. It's going to be lovely. Let's just hope we have a lovely warm weekend like we had last year, where everybody can sit outside and chat, and that's the best.
And have a fire pit.
Yes, come to this fire pit and actually take part in the digital online part of the festival. So we don't just stick with the place. We don't isolate people who can't make it. Tune in to us and get interviews with some of the performers and perhaps see a couple of the shows.
You never know until you Google East Anglian Festival.
Yeah, what we're going to do. Well, you might even get our new website. Woo!
Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah, for doing this with us.
All right.
It was really nice.
Thank you for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to talk about things and just sit here in my other home and tell you stories from Wincanton. That's really weird. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
All right. That's lovely.
What's coming up next week?
Next week, we are talking with the wonderful Giovanna Conforto from Italy, but very connected to the UK as well. So many people in the UK know her because she was connected to Emerson College and she taught at Emerson College. So we are going to experience both realities, the Italian reality and the reality of a storytelling school in the UK.
Lovely. I'm looking forward to meet her then and learn more about her. Thank you, ladies. Have an awesome day.
You too. Bye bye.